Hey guys, it's Daniella Rabbani. I'm your host of the Mom Curious podcast. And no, you are not listening to the first episode. You are listening to a repeat guest, I try not to play favorites.
Yeah.
But she's my favorite.
Aww.
And everyone knows it because I talk about her probably 3/4 of my conversations start with, I met you at a Mother Untitled event. And, oh, you're Neha's friend. And so you know her well. You love her very much. Her name is Neha Rush. She is the founder of Mother Untitled. She has a book coming out called The Power Pause. And she's my friend. And I get to hang out with her for the next 45 minutes in public. Lucky, lucky me. Welcome back.
You're such a natural at this.
Oh, I'm having such a good time.
I love watching you work. It is such a joy. And I try not to play favorites either, but this is, I mean, I've said it before. You are a real natural at this.
Thank you. I love everything about what you're up to and what you have been up to. The Power Pause is much anticipated. Like
by me.
No, by so many of
I
us.
talk about it a lot. Yes.
You talk about it a lot, but like so do the rest of us, because you've somehow in this time of being at home with your kids have also cultivated a tremendous community of women who look to you as a thought leader and as a mentor. And somehow you were able to do it while pulling back sometimes to be with your kids. Sometimes you were going full force into throwing events and building websites and writing your book, but always with such authenticity and integrity. And I can tell everyone that on mic because I was there. I was watching it. It's amazing. And I'm so, so, so proud of you. When is the launch of your book? Like when can we get it into our hands? I haven't read it, just so you guys know.
Sorry.
Not even I. Favorite podcaster and all.
I know. You're giving me that look.
It's behind like golden
It's
bars.
It's not. We need to get you
It's like
a copy. We have been slowly sending out galleys, which is a really interesting process to see it out in the world after so long. The book comes out January 14th. So we're about 100 days out.
Wow.
Which, like, I'm not counting or anything. But it has been a really long process. And I think, people talk about books. And they're like, oh, how long did it take you to write? And I don't think it's that. It's that, to your point, like, this was a very slow build, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm so glad that I built it the way I did because I really lived it. It would be very weird to write a book on a career pause if I hadn't really taken one.
I gotta tell you that a lot of people do that. Like a lot of people are just talking out two sides in their mouth, and you're not that person.
I'm not. And I've been saying, I actually have been going back to some of my original posts, which is how you and I met. I think one of the joys of getting to be in conversation with you is because we've both seen each other grow up alongside our kids. Yeah. And I think, when you and I met, we were in the Soho House elevator. And, at that point, the Soho House was sort of this like creative hub. And, we were still all fighting over, plugs. There weren't enough plugs or tables or chairs, but we all went there at least like 1 or 2 days a week just to hold on to that creative part of ourselves, I think. And at that point, I don't remember. I must have had a little bit over a year old. And you had Ness. And I remember, I think you were just among so many of the women that I met that just sort of defied every stereotype about what it meant to be an ambitious woman who really loved motherhood and wanted to make room for it, right? Yeah. And I think you shaped this work in a really big way. So when I get to contribute to your work in such a small way, it feels so special.
Oh, if you actually contributed to my work in a profound way because you came on. I love that episode, you guys. If you want to, scroll back and listen, please do. But those events that you threw in New York to build your community was so beneficial for me and for so many other women, because there we were just like raising our kids at the park all day. Maybe we were doing some play dates or whatever. We were like introducing solid food. And then we got to like dress up and be together in a way that you dignified the experience. Like you made it chic. And I don't know that there are other community circles like that, certainly not in New York, but like it wasn't a church, it wasn't a synagogue, it wasn't a PTA meeting. It was a celebration of women as mothers.
Well, I think it was proof that we were all still networking in motherhood. Like, and that is, it's funny, it's chapter 7 in the book. You and I were just sort of talking about the arc of the book, and the book sort of follows the arc of a woman choosing and stepping into her career pause and then settling into the day-to-day to thrive, and then ultimately like really unlocking the potential. And for me, those events, that community, including but not limited to in the baby classes, on the playgrounds, and ultimately in those rooms, was one of the greatest possibilities of that stage of life, because it was, you know, one of the myths is that your network dies. When in reality, I think we all sort of got to open up our worlds beyond sort of the workplaces that we knew. I had never met anyone outside of strategy and consulting and advertising, and, you know, being able to suddenly have an invisible thread. And I credit that Jenny Maness, who is a mutual friend of ours, said that to me once, this invisible thread that connects all mothers. She actually wrote it in one of those profiles. Remember when I first started, I was just profiling women like you, women like Jenny, women like so many of the shared friends we've met over the years who were finding their own ways to make room for motherhood. But that thread allowed us to connect, even if you were a cool actress and I was, you know, just me. And,
oh my God, just you.
And then, but there were so many of us who suddenly, it didn't matter what worlds we came from before, we had that in common. And I think that's been one of the most special things.
So those events that you started throwing, did they begin right when Bodhi was around 1 year old, when you left your corporate consulting job?
No, I started when I was, I left corporate consulting. So Bodhi would have been just a little bit over a year. I was building Mother Untitled as really the idea it wasn't about events or Instagram or newsletter. It was really just the idea of a space for ambitious women making room for family life. That was it. And so whatever the format that could take, I did. And in any format that would add unique value. And back then it was 2017, and it was the rise of the girl boss movement. The Wing was doing great. Lean In was doing great. And, you know, I do think there were incredible networking spaces for women, but you had to be sort of this creative entrepreneur, or you had to be a founder, or you had, you know, there had to be, I remember Chief was just starting.
You had to be working outside of the home.
Yeah,
really.
Chief was just starting. Hey Mama was thriving. And I think those were such phenomenal platforms. And I credit so many of those spaces for developing friendships. But for anyone who had parted with their title and no longer had a pithy way to answer, what do you do? There was no space online or offline that felt like it was reflecting our sort of multi-hyphens and the fact that our ambition and our feminism and our creativity and our networks hadn't gone and died. So no, I started it really as a blog and Instagram and with a newsletter. I sent it out for the first time on January 10th of 2017. I've sent one every single week since. And the blog really was highlighting different women. You remember this, like we talked about, those profiles.
I was one of those women.
And then the first event I did was to celebrate the 1 year of that platform.
Wow.
It was in January 2018 with Maman. That's how Elisa and I became friends. And what's really special is they are throwing my launch party. So Elisa is, you know, which is just like totally full circle. I've done every event since with them for the most part.
Beautiful events.
And I remember looking around. We had a watercolor station. And, you know, it did feel elevated, but every woman in that room,
The kids
some
were
had
there.
kids.
Yeah.
Yep, some had kids. And I think that was the first time I said, it's a really special thing to get to do this online and create space for women to feel seen. And I love words and I love being able to share that, but bringing women together for a moment to sort of feel like their full selves and dignified and respected. That's a really impactful way to do it too.
Would you call yourself a stay-at-home mother?
Not anymore. First of all, I think that idea of sort of stay at home, I have a lot of, if you really get into like the linguistics around it, stay at home, I've always taken issue with, because just like the sheer linguistics, and I can nerd out about it and it's in the book, but the like sheer linguistics suggest that it's like stagnant and stuck in one place versus working is a verb, right? And if you really date it back, stay at home actually came from like a Jane Austen book, and it was really used in the construct of referring to a hermit. So like if you've ever actually been at home, you know that you are not actually stagnant and you are not actually just stuck and shut in. And so, I have issues with the phrase, but I also don't know if I have issue with the linguistics or the stereotypes surrounding it, right? And I think it's probably both. And when I've polled our audience over the years, because obviously our mission is to rebrand the stay-at-home mother, what I've heard back is we want both. We want to be able to dignify stay-at-home mother because it's in the vernacular and it, for better or for worse, it's not going away tomorrow.
And whatever that means, we know as parents, like, they're doing a shit ton of work that's really meaningful.
Yeah, and I think the flip side is, could we introduce new language? And I would say, could it get to a place where this idea of stay at home and working is actually dismantled completely? Because I think one of the sort of sub-bullets of this work is to say, actually, it's so much more fluid now, right? The data, we commissioned a survey called American Mothers on Pause with this research firm in Maryland called Proof Insights. And what we found is that 1 in 3 women in the next 2 years are planning on pausing their career. 1 in 2 are planning on downshifting their work hours. And then HBR found ages ago that 90% of women at home were aiming to return to the paid workforce eventually. So like we're all just more alike. And with the rise of entrepreneurism, freelance, small business, the gig economy, we're just seeing so many more women in between than ever before. And so I would like to get to a world where you just say, right now I get to be mostly with my kids and I'm working on X alongside, which is what I always said. Even when I had chapters that I was fully at home when I was doing this in the naps and night times. But no, now to answer your question, I think my kids have aged into school, which is incredible, right? Like there are days I don't see them till 5 o'clock based on just after school activities. And I've stepped into more of this work in the months leading up to the book publication.
You got an office.
I have a small little office that is
outside of your
it's just wild.
Office.
It is outside of the closet off the playroom, which I was in up through, August. So that's a big deal. It happens to be right next to the kids' school, but that maximizes my time, so that helps. And it works. But I think even now, I wouldn't say stay at home or working. I'd say right now I'm working on getting my book out into the world, and we'll see what comes next.
Just as you were talking, musing on like the linguistics of it all, I just thought to myself, I remember asking my meditation teacher, like, do you believe in God? And he was like, I experience God. And I realized, like, the idea of stay at home or working, when I ask someone like you, is like, I experience the gray. You are living in the gray where you get to be there for your children and ramp that up. And you get to be there for your book baby. Sometimes people call them book babies. I'm
not there.
You're not there.
Keep going.
Okay.
That's like when people call my dog a baby, and I'm like, I love my dog, but like it's not the same.
It's
like, don't compare her
unless
to my
you
kids.
get a dog before you have children.
Yeah, I'm sure that relationship is different.
Yeah, because also the dog is like, it's a whole other thing once you have kids. But anyway, like you really, to me, exemplify someone who's experiencing the gray area.
Yes.
That like you are advocating for the stay-at-home mother, and that title never really suited you because you were always
holding on to creative pursuit alongside, even when I was full-time at home. And I think the stat is 9 out of 10 women are, right? And so
I did not know that.
And so you're looking at a generation of women who are volunteering, they're working in advocacy, they're starting small projects alongside, they're taking online certification classes. And that is a big reason why I'm trying to dispel this idea of women stepping into a chapter of a career pause or a chapter of stay-at-home motherhood and just not learning anymore, even if they were doing nothing else besides parenthood, which, by the way, I did do. Like, there were years that I really, yes, I had my blog and Instagram, but I was planting seeds. I was really keeping the lights on, and it was great because, you know, in those hours I was able to sort of keep my finger on the pulse of media, which I really loved, and women and research.
But your kids were always a huge inspiration for you.
But, you know, and I think that my kids also, if I hadn't shifted and sort of done more volunteering at times, I wouldn't have realized, oh my gosh, these women in the PTA and planning these benefits are learning and doing more than we did oftentimes in the workforce, right? Like, so there is asthma. There's so much work. I mean, that one time I took that position, I heard it was a 2-year role, and then I mean, it was just like a trick. It was a trick, and I really do.
You did it?
I did it.
Wow.
I did it. It was 2 years.
Lucky them.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was fun. I was glad. I lived it. I can really say that, you know, if you are sort of fully at home and fully on a career pause, I think that it is a way to sort of exercise some of those skills. I think exercise some of your network. My particular position was a lot of sort of community relations. And so I love that, you know, and, but my, you know, I think we're all in the gray.
Relations within the PTA.
Oh, totally.
Relations.
Totally.
So good.
I think but there's a real, I mean, I guess going back to the original point, which is even if you weren't keeping your hand in any of those other sort of side projects and exploration, if you were just fully focused on parenting.
And your marriage.
And your family administration, that is such tremendous work, especially today. Obviously I've interviewed women for the 8 years I've been building Mother Untitled, but for the book alone, I interviewed 100 women across the country. Experts were a different bucket, but these were women who had taken pauses or shifts from different socioeconomic strata, different industries, different cultures of origin. And what was wild to me is how many evolved their perspective because of their time in care, like the day-to-day, minute-to-minute of caregiving, because that work is such intellectual labor, right? There was a woman who did government grants beforehand, and she was planning on going back. She had 4 kids. They ended up moving to Virginia. She realized how much she loved early education with her children, which I know resonates with you. Yeah. And she ended up going back as a teacher's assistant. That was her sort of transition back. There's a woman who maybe you know, I'm not going to use her name, but she was a mother, is a mother to 2 children who are neurodivergent, and the sort of health advocacy and navigating very complicated systems was just a full-time job in and of itself. So she left product marketing, was fully at home managing the sort of special needs of her family. And that was in and of itself tremendous. But through that community that she met through raising boys with autism, she found a role that she ended up going back to in the evening. She's an auction host. She's an auctioneer.
What?
Because she was like, it's so different. It lets me be able, you know, she found her voice in advocating for her children.
And who knows what she'll do when they're older and older 100%.
Than that. And all to say that even, you know, those examples, but many others of women who are sort of fully in the pause, their brains are expanding, their interests are expanding, they have their hands in the very intense day-to-day of caring for kids and families. I mean, like, you and I know that, like, modern day parenting is just
so intense. It's so lonely intense. And it's so intense.
It's so intense, but it's also so confusing. Like, there's so much content.
And so much
information
flung at us.
Today I saw, I think it's the Atlantic, they were talking about lighthouse parenting. And I was like, lighthouse parenting? What is lighthouse parenting? I mean, I thought we were still on, like, there was bulldozers, there were helicopters, there were drones.
Oh.
Now we're lighthouses. I was like,
what is this?
I would need 4 hours just to go down and figure out what kind of parent I want to be. And then I'd have to go learn how to be that parent.
I know. And I think there's a lot of outsourcing of our own power. I think I love the name of your book, The Power Pause, because I just would never associate caregiving and downshifting for family with power. And actually you honing, accessing, growing your power by saying, this is what I want to do with my choice in my time in life. Like, we often are just like giving our power away to so many experts, and like, who's really an expert on my kid?
Or me.
Barely me.
Yeah, God forbid you think about you.
Right. I just think you're right. I think it's like a really intense time to be a parent. And I love that I've watched you decide sometimes to dial down the noise from the outside and then dial it up.
Mm-hmm.
And all the while you're keeping your network and your community in touch. I love that, like, you're able to use Instagram, and that you actually talk about how Instagram has built so much of your career at this point and your network. And you see that there are some downsides, but the upsides for mothers
is huge. And that's the interesting part, is I think we're comparing, and you know this, and maybe we talked about it a couple of years ago, but a lot of this work came from the fact that when I first paused, or I initially downshifted into consulting, right? But I immediately started hearing the flack. And all of it, I came to realize, was just sort of remnants of, and I hate to throw feminism under the bus, because I don't think it's feminism's fault. I think the second wave of feminism did so much incredible work.
This is the next step.
This is the next second. We needed that. We needed the 1970s and 1980s to propel women into the workforce, to show that we're capable, to advocate for that level of respect outside of the home. But what we did was we sort of pinned any time in the home as defending tradition. And we made sort of anyone in the workforce as the pillar of what it means to be modern and feminist. And so then, it sort of accelerated into Lean In, which also it bolstered so many women's careers, and we can't take that away, but it did cast this undue shame on anyone who was choosing to dial down or pause.
To me, you are a feminist thought leader. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's your tagline. I don't know if that's your bio. I don't know. But for me, this is the next rung in that conversation.
I agree.
Because that fluidity is in and of itself the feminine. The fact that we can weave in and out, and I do believe that we need more women in power. But if we cannot hone our own power, our own choice, our own life, we're destabilized. I saw you on a panel with 2 CEOs who have done tremendous things in their industry, 2 women. And they were, I don't know, they must be 15, 20 years older than you. And it was so beautiful to watch them grapple with all the things that you talk about in your pause, all the self-growth, all the, let's say, therapy and the exploration and the creative pursuits for the sake of creativity. They needed to get into the weeds of that development at some point. And you just sort of said, I want to do that before I write my book.
Well,
I want to do that
before.
before.
At different times with our kids. Some people don't feel that ache for it.
No.
When they have kids first. But, you're looking at women also who decide, oh, my kid's 10 and now they need me much more.
Yes. I
hear it a lot.
And my sister-in-law stayed home with her 4 kids. And she was like, back to work at a corporate job after like six months. She has 4 children. They were like a set of twins and 2 little boys, like all within 3 years. She was right back to work. But then in, I don't know, like middle school, she was like, these kids need me. She stayed home with them for a couple of years.
I've heard women also around the college process.
No way.
Yeah. Or when they reach burnout later, like, post. And it's such an interesting, there's so many junctures and reasons. Like the research shows that like obviously the most popular reason, I think it's 87% of women who choose to pause their career is because of the very valid want to be with their children. Right? And that is a valid want. And the fact that we've said that's anti-feminist or implied in any ways that's anti-feminist, going back to our conversation, I think as we think about this sort of next wave of feminism, which I don't think it's a wave, it's just an evolution of now we finally have this power to be able to say, okay, we tried that. We worked really, really hard, except we need to make this work for our families and the realities that we live in because we are unique. And I think for too long, feminism was trying to pretend we were exactly like men.
Right.
And now we're like, wait a second, but we're not. We actually grow babies, give birth to babies, then have to feed those babies, then have to like deal with a broken childcare system and like a very high and inaccessible cost of childcare and just the like desire to want to spend time and raise those children in a very complicated world at different seasons and different stages. So yeah, well, now we need to make feminism account for that by owning what makes us uniquely feminine. And I don't think we can get the supports we need until we start getting louder about being uniquely women, right? Like the workplace wasn't built for men and we were trying to fit ourselves in and it was
built for men.
Yes, exactly. But we, now I think we're at this place where we're saying, well, this isn't, we're watching women create essentially a whole new economy, right? Of creator, like look at the creator economy. It's a massive, I don't think I'm alone in saying Instagram helped launch my career. I think because of the access to digital technology and the freelance marketplace and online tools to launch businesses with more ease. And then you're seeing women say, well, that's not really working for the reality of the family life I want. So I wonder what it would look like to be able to make this other thing work.
But there are powerhouses like Serena Williams who amplify your message. There are these like tremendous CEOs and actors and like people are resonating with your work in a tremendous way from, Kansas to like Hollywood to, Wall Street. We all as women are like, wait, there's something here. And it's not necessarily when our kids are babies. It's not necessarily, if they're neurodivergent, but for all of us we feel so seen by you. And the fact that you have the words that not everyone does around the respect and the validation of being a mother and wanting to do it your way. I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to thank you for that because I'm noticing that like there are the women who do caregiving all day long and they're, right there hanging on your every word, but so are the rest of us. So are the rest of us who are the host of this podcast and, like working their ass off at 9 to 5s,
Well, I think we're all at different times. And I think this is what's so interesting about the book. People are like, well, who's it for? And I think it's for women, whether they're sort of considering it as an option and not just a pause, but even a shift of any sort, right? Because this isn't just about fully pausing. It's also about downshifting or dialing down like you talk about I did, right? Like I think it can be such a blow to our ego when we're not going 100% in our careers because we have been programmed to believe that's how we're worthy and that's how we're relevant.
Yeah.
And that if we took our feet off the gas for a minute, we sort of become extinct. And, you know, I'm so glad you brought up Serena or, you know, some of these other incredible women, because I think this idea that a career pause is a career end or a career slowdown is a career end, a lot of the book is sort of a strategic way in which to stay connected and to keep growing and to make sure that you are still growing, and so that you don't look back on that chapter and say, I was burdened with shame or disempowered because I didn't feel sort of financially as much like I was contributing, and I didn't know I was allowed to enjoy it or to unlock the full possibility of it, right? So in that way, going back to what I was saying, it's for the women considering it, even slowing down as an option, women in it who are sort of in the day-to-day and just trying to figure out, how can I just like walk a little bit more confidently, feel agency in my relationship with my partner, to use our household income as our household income because I am contributing, to ask for help. And then for even, you know, as women sort of think about what comes next, there is a next. And
so
I think
what comes next?
And I think the women who, you know, can really sort of walk through whether it's the book or the process and find this community to say, I have goals independent of my children. My ultimate success in this chapter, whether I take 1 year off or I shift my career to be, you know, fully focused on the podcast, but I have 4 days a week, that not that that's what you're doing, but for, you know, that I'm home with my kids, whatever you're doing to make room for family life, the ultimate success metric isn't going to be just your kids' behavior, because that is a surefire way to feel terrible about yourself and put immense pressure on you and your children. And we see it. I see it in the research and I fell into that trap.
We all do.
You know, and then you think, well, what have I been doing all this time if
they're not perfect?
If they're not perfect. And then, but if you can take a step back, if you can step in and say, well, what are parts of me that I can grow that I've never gotten to focus on before? Not because I'm suddenly swimming in time. Anyone who's taken care of kids knows you're not suddenly like blessed with extra hours in your day, but you are sort of free of the construct of meetings and the sort of walls that close you in and the people that you're forced to network with. Like, you suddenly are open to new people, new ideas. I always say, I don't think that I wouldn't have started a blog and an Instagram if I was at an age. I just wouldn't have done it. Like, I would have felt, you know, too self-conscious. I wouldn't have thought that like I had the right to creatively explore. I don't think I would have made as much of an effort in those baby classes or to find networks like Hey Mama, or now there's Misha Pods, you know, to plug in and meet interesting people, learn from them. And so I do think a big part of, you know, and it's the last section of the book, but a big part of this is knowing that you have this time and place can also be for you to learn and grow. And if, you know, kids unlock that in you, they unlock like the deepest personal growth. But they also inspire you to figure out, like, if I'm going to be spending my time, I want to spend it on things of meaning. And figuring out what those things of meaning are is a really fun exercise in parenthood.
Can you tell me, how do you dial back up? Like, I've watched you so beautifully. So I met you when you had already left your corporate consulting gig, but I've watched you plant these seeds for many years. How long has it been? Has it been like 6 years?
7.
Wow.
7.5. It'll be.
And I think it's important to say that, because I think, like, you know, we live in a world where it's like overnight success, and it's like, no. No. It took 7 years after, you know, an Ivy League education, a master's, a huge job, fully immersive experience with your children, while you were planting seeds, writing a book, and I'm watching you emerge as the star that you are, the absolute fucking star that you are. And I'm wondering how we can translate that for the viewer who's like, my kids are in school. How do I dial it up? I dialed it down. How do I dial it up? How are you dialing it up right now?
Well, I think I got a little, you know, not lucky in that I found something pretty much right away that I was passionate about, right? I didn't think the work and family, it just stood out to me, that thing that I cared about, because I was feeling that ache from being judged, and I realized the judgments didn't match. So, but I think the feeling of, oh, this thing is interesting to me and wanting to double click on it exists for a lot of people. I think there's sort of the person who feels right away like, oh, this interest is popping up, or I've always had it in the back of my mind. There's women who really don't know where to start. And I would always say, cast a wide net and see what comes back. I talk about it in chapter 8, but like that could be if volunteering is accessible to you. I interviewed a woman in the Bay Area who basically started taking 1 or 2 volunteer positions a year within the school, and ultimately realized that in working on the benefit committee and in event planning, she felt lit up. She felt really engaged with that, and ended up going back into a role in events, first as an intern and then ultimately finding her way back.
Cool.
There's a great creative teacher I interviewed, Jill Elliott, who used to run an ad agency that paused, started a creative studio. And one of the things she says is notice the content that you're consuming, right? Or the people you find interesting. Let's take content you're consuming. If you're listening to certain podcasts or even your Instagram feed and you're like, oh, I follow a lot of cooking accounts or interior design accounts or women's media accounts or advocacy accounts, the content you're consuming leaves clues for what you're interested in, right? But giving yourself, let's call it 3 months, give yourself an increment of time to just look at the data points and study yourself. And if the data points aren't there, consider this idea of volunteering. One other way to do it is sort of, and I encourage women to sort of go through as soon as they step into a career pause, but at any juncture, start chronicling all the things that you're proud of in the tiniest tasks, right? Like it doesn't need to be something flashy, but like this other woman mentioned coordinating the bus route for her town in Virginia. Like it was a really complicated school district. It was really problematic. It ended up, it was sort of buried in a list of all these other things she did, advising her partner on his business, managing a medical diagnosis. But what she ended up connecting the dots on was, oh, I'm really interested in project management. And so, in an ideal world, you're leaning on resources, whether it's the Power Pause or you're coming to a community like ours or other communities where you sort of have a framework that encourages you to set your goals for this period of time, invest in a regular basis, even if it's quarterly, even if it's annually, allowing yourself to do small measurable things like staying connected on LinkedIn to your network and liking different, keeping your finger on the pulse of your old industry.
Amazing.
All of these things are available, but it doesn't feel obvious when you're sort of buried in the day-to-day until you give yourself permission to invest that time in yourself too. And give yourself a sort of, it doesn't have to be as methodical as I suggest, but, give yourself those moments to check in with yourself and recognize that you're growing. Decide where you want to grow more, decide where you want to explore a little bit further and test and learn. The next job doesn't have to be the best job. It doesn't have to be the forever job. It's all sort of stepping stones. And if I could add one more thing about sort of my journey, you might see this book now and think like, oh, this feels so exciting and so big. But for a long time, it was a little blog that I really felt a lot of judgment around, right?
Oh, you did?
I did.
Still?
I did. No, not anymore. I mean, I still don't think it is necessarily understood by everyone, right? But part of this work was getting to explore what was true to me and interesting to me and letting go of what other people think. And I think that can be one of the biggest gifts of motherhood is letting go of what everyone else thinks and sort of honing in on what really feels right for right now.
How's it going right now?
It is, I would say this is like definitely more of the sweet spot for me. I love community building. I love storytelling. I've worked on this for so long. To give this the sort of moment it deserves, I think this movement, it's always right time and right place. And like the world really has been re-examining. I think people are ready, or they're ready for a fresh take. And work and family hasn't been working that great.
No, it has not.
And so, I think in that regard, it's going well because I'm excited. I'm fired up. I think the hard parts are, I think the guilt follows you anywhere. I do try and be home by 4:30 every day, so I'm with my kids. But I do have a babysitter handling pickup every day, which is new.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's different. I think the thing that gets me through is the same thing that I actually talk about in the context of pausing or shifting, which is like, this is for right now.
Yes.
I'm literally the only reason this is sustainable is because I am sort of mentally committed to let me get through and re-examine everything in March. I'm taking 2 weeks. I mean, and so there's sort of a moment. I'm sort of giving myself another sort of check-in point. But, it's funny, no matter what happens with the book, I do think the idea of failing feels less intimidating because I'm like, what failing? Like, I get to go home to my kids at the end of the day. Like, no matter what happens on January 14th or January 21st, like, I got to design this thing that impacted a few people, and my kids are happy.
Oh my God, you've impacted so many people. I mean, you do know.
I do know. I do know.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad
and I think that's why, of course I want it to wake culture up. I do. I really feel like it deserves to. Like, I think it could really change this for our daughters. I really do believe that if we can give women permission to sort of pause or slow down for a little bit, and then be able to transition back, then when our daughters grow up, that won't feel like such a burdensome choice.
Well, I think the biggest fear about slowing down is the reentry. And I know that you have a lot of resources around, of course, that amazing, all the advice you just shared, but even just like putting motherhood on your resume, like building your community and your networking, and just knowing that like there is a bias right now. There is a bias that on my resume, it's like I've been on TV and oh, I did a couple plays. Oh, she has a podcast. It's like, where was she? She was home with her children. And I hope that we can change culture, but at the very least, what you have done so far in your community is allowed us all to grapple with that truth. Like, it's okay to slow down, and you might be faced with some friction on the other side. But the more we can hone our power in this pause, the more we can respect ourselves and our own decisions and acknowledge, oh my gosh, I did that bus route. That bus route is something I could never do, by the way. Like,
oh my God. Well, and this is what I would say. The last chapter of the book is returning with confidence. And I talked to a number of HR leaders to get their take on it, on the return. And first of all, the sort of normalcy around, there is a normalization of seeing a pause. It is still, the onus is still on the returner to frame their non-traditional experience.
Tell me everything.
So and a lot of that is language. A lot of that is practicing. A lot of that is framing the non-traditional experience in a way that is valuable, right? So instead of saying managed bus route, you would say planned and executed complex infrastructure changes for local, I'm making this up as we go, a local Southern District of Virginia presented and litigated through 6 counties to execute change, right? Like,
which is all true.
Which is all
big
true,
words.
but it's very big words, and it actually is the reality, right? Like that woman who handled the benefit. Do you know there was a woman recently who tallied up all the amount that she had raised in sort of volunteer advocacy work over her 18-year career break, and she had raised $4 million.
Oh, wow.
For her town. $4 million. Wow. But, you know, a lot of times we undersell that, right? Volunteered for town. Local town ambassador raises $4 million for school. You know, and so a lot of that last chapter isn't to put lipstick on a pig, but it is to say your work has had value. If you have just been moving your family from, you know, I spoke to many military wives, manage family relocation consistently to 3 foreign environments, right? Like, what does that entail? And it's giving language and gravitas and dignity to the work that you have been doing and tying it either back or forward to whatever you're seeking to do next, right? Because all of your traditional work experience didn't disappear. And all the courses, and I talk a lot about sort of if you're in the sort of like hard data, like if you're in SEO and SEO has changed in like the last 5 years, definitely take an SEO certification class, right? Like whatever it may be.
You gotta update your skills.
But there's a world where we get to own our story. And I'm not going to say that your resume is going to get a fair shot. It's probably going to, if compared to another one, I think 70% of HR managers are comfortable seeing a pause, but 30% are still not. We hope to change that. But for those 70%, this is a world where we can sort of shape the conversation. We just need to give women the ability to. And on the other side, change the perception, right? So it is still sort of a two-way issue.
Oh, it's absolutely a two-way issue. But at the very least, we can come armed with language and with actual real confidence, knowing that we have made a difference in our community and in our homes and in ourselves, which is important. It means something.
Well, I mean, the personal growth part is the best part. Like you asked me how I am. 8 years ago, I would have been buckling under I can't even imagine being able to walk through what is like arguably an intense time, you know, or a high pressure time. And it just like, I sleep like a baby at night.
Wow.
Because I have 2 kids sleeping. I need to wake up in the morning. I have no time to lose sleep over like anything else. And I think the perspective gained, the work done on my own safety, on my own anxiety so that I can raise healthy children, like that is the work that I'm the most proud of.
Yeah. I am so grateful for all the work, for the work that you've done in your own self with your children, who I like get the pleasure of seeing every now and then, the work you do in your family as a wife and as a like amazing administrator. I'm grateful that I get the chance to witness it and to make it my own, you know? Like, you're my friend. You're good at being a friend also.
Oh, that's nice to say.
Oh, you're really good at being a friend.
I'm really feeling sad that I didn't bring you cake.
Oh, you could eat some cake.
Yeah.
But I you know, you being you just as you are would have been enough. And then you get to write a book on top of it all. I'm grateful. I'm really grateful because outside of New York, the rest of the country gets to love it. And I'm excited for all those translations for the world to enjoy it too, because it is a world conversation. And I'm grateful for you starting it and for my being a teeny tiny part of amplifying it. I can't wait to read it.
You're going to get a copy very soon. I promise. I promise.
Me and Johan are like, come on, give me that copy.
And Laura.
And Laura, who's obsessed. Laura, our executive producer, who sometimes comes on the show and is our third voice, was obsessed with the idea of coming back on. But, you know, she got sick. This happens.
'Tis the season.
Yeah. Thank you. Any parting words? Did we forget anything? Anything we want to tell the people of the world?
No. I think we covered the state of the world. I think the world is very complicated, so let's try and stay away from the state of the world. But in our tiny world, I think the greatest impact we can have, the greatest thing we can all do, if you take away anything, is when a woman says that she is on a career break.
Yeah.
Don't judge her. Like, I think this, and if a woman is working out of the home, don't judge her. I think this culture of judgment between us, we're just so much more alike than we are different. And we're all just constantly shifting. I was the mom who was always at pickup. Now I'm the mom who's never at pickup. We're shifting over and over, and we're all doing the best we can with what's available to us.
Have fun at the orthodontist.
Thank you.
Love
Priorities.
You.
Love you.
Bye, friends. I hope you pick up The Power of Pause and we'll read it together. Maybe we should do a book club. You into it? Let me know at Daniella Rabbani or at Mom Curious on Instagram. Bye. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Mom Curious podcast. My name is Daniella Rabbani. I am your host, and I would love to continue this conversation at Daniella Rabbani on Instagram. And if you'd be so kind to rate and review, share this podcast, I would be just really grateful. Catch you next time, every Tuesday on the Mom Curious podcast, produced by Hoff Studios. You can find them at Hoff Studios on Instagram as well. All right, have a great day.